Hi everyone, my name is Haze. I'm an artisan speed painter from Malaysia and welcome to the 3-day portrait challenge. So the 3-day portrait challenge is where you spend 1 to 2 hours every day working on your portrait in the hopes of getting a portrait like this. And today is day 2. So today we'll be working on how to color the portrait, and at the end of today you will get something like this. So without any further ado, let's get started. Okay, before we start today's challenge, remember to download the following resources from my website first. Also remember to download the reference photo from the link in the description below.
Mask!
Picking up from where we left off yesterday, we are going to create a new layer under the final sketch layer, and we will call this layer face. And then we will just create 2 more layers and call it hand and hair. You can take a look at the left panel for the list of layers and which layer we are currently working on with the double arrows. And now we are going to pick the face layer and begin working on it. Now we're going to tap on the color palette icon and pick a lime green color. Using the lime green color, I'm going to paint just the face and make sure that the borders of the face are very clean. Now if you look here at the left panel, you will see the brushes and the color swatch and the layers that is being used. So anytime you want to check this out, just look at the left. If you haven't noticed by now, the new brush that I'm using is the painting brush from the Portrait brush pack, and this brush is good for filling in large areas. You want to make sure that your borders are really clean before you proceed. So to proceed, we are going to create a new layer underneath the face layer, and we're going to call this the neck layer. And in the neck layer, I'm going to choose a blue color to paint the neck. Once we are done, we're going to pick the hand layer and paint it in red. Now we're going to go back to our layers, and by sliding left on the hair layer, we're going to tap on duplicate. Then we're going to drag this new hair layer beneath the face layer. Using a dark purple, we're going to paint the hair in these 2 layers where they overlap beneath and above the current layer, so be mindful which layer you're painting on. I'm going to pick a lighter purple color for the bottom hair layer, and once I'm done, it's going to look like this. So now if you look at the layers, this is how all the layers with all the colors are organized. Now let's tap on the background color, and then we'll pick this color from the Easy Skin Tone palette. Alright, all our layers are ready, including the background with all the colors nicely painted with a clean border. Now to continue, we're going to tap on each layer and tap on Alpha Lock. So this will ensure that when we are painting on these layers, we will not spill over the border that we have already painted. For example, let me show you. Let me hide everything except for the hair layer, and now you see when I'm painting over it in red, nothing is spilling over the border that we have already painted.
Coloring!
Okay, now we're going to begin coloring. Now we're going to pick the hair layer on top, and we're going to tap on this color. Then we're going to drag the swatch from the top to our hair. And now we're going to tap on the bottom hair layer, but we'll make sure that it's turned on first so that it's visible, and we're going to drag the same color onto the hair. These methods will miss some parts, so make sure you color all the parts that's missed up. Now we're going to tap on the neck layer and make sure it's visible by unchecking it, and then we're going to take this color and then we'll drag it to the neck. Now I want you to listen very carefully. We're going to switch our brush to the saturation brush, and then we are going to pick a color that we think is the color of the neck. But it would not be as dark or as light as the color, it's just changing the color that we want to change. So I think that the shadow areas are going to be red. So I'm going to pick a redder color from my Easy Skin Tone palette, and I'm going to use it to color over the shadow areas. You see that this is actually changing the color, but it's not making it any darker or lighter. But this is fine, we are just coloring and we are not worrying about how dark or light the area is. I want you to continue picking colors from the Easy Skin Tone palette to match the color that you see in the photo, but make sure that you are not pressing in really hard, because we just want to slightly tint the area to be the color that we think it is. So just use a light touch and that would be good. Now let's move on to the hand layer. We'll tap on the hand layer and make sure it's visible, and then we'll pick the pink color because that's the color of the highlight, and we'll drop it into the hand. Now same thing as before, we're going to use a saturation brush and paint whatever color that we think we see, and do not worry about how light or dark it is. Make sure that the brush size that you use are as big as possible, because if you use a small brush, it can end up very messy later on. When you're doing this, remember that you can use the flat brush smudge for the smudge tool to smudge the areas around and also to keep some of the edges clean. Take your time and paint the colors that you think is correct. Don't worry if you feel that it's wrong, you'll still have a chance to correct it later on. Once we're done, we're gonna pick the face layer and then make sure it's turned on, and then we'll drop this color right into the face. And now we'll repeat the same procedure that we did earlier on by coloring the entire face, but this time it's the face, and let's make sure that everything is as detailed as we like. As you watch me color, just remember to follow your instinct and pick the color that you see in the photo when you're doing this. I'm gonna leave a cheat sheet on the left panel for you guys to follow. It's really basic, so you don't have to follow it to the dot. Just follow your instincts, and don't forget that you can always change this later on. Okay, once you're happy with your coloring, we can proceed to the next step.
Shading.
We'll start by shading the hand first. Pick the hand layer and tap on duplicate. Then tap the N icon on the new layer and pick multiply. This will make the color darker. And then we're going to rename this layer as hand shadow 1. Now I want you to go into the adjustment menu and go to hue, saturation and brightness. So usually you just need to lower the saturation to match the color of the shadows in the photo that you see. So use the photo as a guide while you do this. Your goal is to use the 3 sliders to match the shadows that you see in the photo. Let's hide the hand shadow 1 for now by tapping the checkbox. Now let's do the same for the neck layer. We'll just duplicate the neck layer, rename it to shadow, and then we will set the blending mode to multiply. Again, we will use the hue, saturation, brightness to adjust this layer. We need to tone down the saturation a lot to match the color of the shadow. Now you can see it's matching the color of the shadow a bit more. Now let's tap on this next shadow layer, and then we can see there's this option called mask, and let's tap on that. We're gonna tap on this layer mask and tap invert. This will make the entire layer mask black. And if you look at the neck now, the shadow is already missing. So right now, if we use white and paint on this layer mask, we can then repaint back the shadows from this layer. To start, let's use the airbrush to paint back the shadows. Now I want you to make sure that you're painting on the layer mask with white in order for this to work. And if you don't understand and it's confusing for now, it's okay, I'll explain more a little bit later on. Remember to use a big brush size and use a light touch when you're doing this. Once you're done painting the shadows, let's go ahead and pick the smudge tool and then smudge the shadows around. Okay, I'm done already, and if you take a look at the layers, at the layer mask in particular, the areas where are black are not showing at all, but the areas where you have just painted white is showing, and it's showing the neck shadow, which results in creating the shadow area for the neck. Just remember, black means hide, white means show. Okay, we're gonna do the same thing for hand shadow 1. Let's turn it on to show it, and let's tap on it and tap on mask to create the mask, and then we will invert it to make it black. Now same thing, we're gonna use white and airbrush to paint over the layer mask. Remember, black means hide and white means show. Just like before, you can use the smudge tool and the flat brush smudge to blend the tones around. You can also use the sketch brush if you want to paint solid and hard-edged shadows like this. Then after that, you can just blend them out using the smudge tool. Remember, you can use the eraser to remove the shading if you don't want the shading. Now take a look at the layers, and if I toggle on and off the hand shadow one, toggling on and off layers can help you understand what's going on when there's so many things involved in the layers manipulation. So once you're done with the hand, let's repeat the same procedure for the face. So once again, duplicate the face layer, rename it, change it to multiply mode, adjust the hue, saturation and brightness to match the photo's shadow, and then we'll create a layer mask, invert it, and then we'll paint the shadows on. When you're painting the shadows, as usual, feel free to use the airbrush, the sketch brush. Also, you can use the smudge tool to smudge the shadows around, and then you can use the eraser to erase shading. Remember, you can always temporarily turn off the final sketch layer to check how neat your shading is, and you can fix it before turning it back on. On the left panel, I left some shading techniques that you can use.
More shading.
So when you're done, we're gonna adjust the hand layer. Let's pick the hand layer and go to hue, saturation, brightness. I'm gonna change the brightness of this layer because I feel it's too light compared to the face. You can also adjust the color at this point. Now to continue, we are going to duplicate the shadow layers. You want to duplicate the shadow layer, and this will result in the shadow and the layer mask layer being duplicated. And then we're going to rename it to shadow 2. Then we're going to tap on the layer mask and clear, and then we're going to invert again. Now we're going to repeat the same steps, only this time the shadows is going to be a lot darker. You can also tap on the shadow 2 layer this time and lower the opacity to suit the photo. So we're going to repeat for all the layers, for the neck shadow, the hand shadow, and the face shadows. This time I want you to hide the final sketch layers as often as you can so that you can clean up all the layer mask for the shadow layers. Remember, you can always use hue, saturation and brightness to adjust the color or the saturation or the brightness of the layer. As you proceed, you realize that your strokes are getting a little bit messy, so don't worry about that and work on the other areas first, because once we merge all these layers, we will be able to adjust the brush strokes. My second shadow pass for my hands is done, and now I'm gonna work on the face shadow. So I duplicate it again, and then I'm gonna clear the mask and also invert it, and I'm gonna continue doing my shading. Don't forget that you can use the eraser to remove shading, and also use the smudge tool and the sketch brush, the airbrush. Use everything that I've taught you so far to continue working on the shading. Halfway doing this, you're going to realize that some parts, the colors are not correct, but don't worry about it, we'll be able to change it later on. We are now just focusing on the shading, which means the light and shadows only. Don't worry so much about the colors for now.
Finishing.
At this point, we have a choice. We can either duplicate the shadow layers again to make the shadows even darker. If your shadows are still too light, you can do this. So I'm going to duplicate my shadow again and repeat the steps all over again. So you can do this as many times as you want, but make sure not to go overboard and make sure that all the values are as simplified as possible and they resemble your photo reference. Okay, when you're done, I want you to select all the layers for the corresponding part. So for now, I'm going to select all my hand layers, and then I'm gonna group them. Then I'm gonna tap on the group, and I'm gonna tap on flatten. This will merge all my layers into one. Sometimes after you merge, you will see artifacts like this, so you can clean it up by erasing. Now I'm going to duplicate my face shadow again and repeat my shading. Now I know that some of you would have messy strokes right now, and then some of the colors would be wrong, but don't worry about it because we are going to fix this tomorrow. Once I'm happy, I will merge it into one layer. At the end of the day, you will only have 6 layers. And that brings us to the end of today's 3-day portrait challenge. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial, and if you are still confused about how to use mask and any of the techniques shown in this video, just message in the comments below and I'll try and get back to you. Like and subscribe to my channel if you would like to support me, and see you tomorrow for last day of the 3-day portrait challenge. Bye!